It's Thursday, 12:30 p.m. I'm Paul John Dykes, and I'm joined by JP Mason for the Acsom Bulletin. Welcome back, JP. How are you doing?
Aye, it feels a bit weird not to be in the studio after a couple of weeks in a row in the studio, but things maybe getting a little bit back to normal in this neck of the woods, hopefully in the whole country. But I'm doing all right. I've just been at a couple of football matches this week, one in Airdrie and one in Manchester. So
right, we're going to have to touch on that. We definitely will touch on your wee whistle stop tour, JP. But I mean, the last few weeks has been topsy-turvy. The emotions have been up and down. I'm not going to use that cliche of the fairy ground ride, because I always feel that when it comes to COVID, it's not like a roller coaster. It's like being on the waltzers, you know what I mean? And getting spun around every time you think that you're coming back to normality. Somebody's spinning you around again, you know?
It is a bit, yeah. Can I just stop you? There is some sort of noise happening at your end just before anybody in the comments points it out, or before somebody points it out when they're listening to it later on tonight, being like, there's an annoying sound. It's like a rustling sound.
Is it?
Yeah.
There's nobody in the studio eating crisps at this moment in time. How's it sounding out there? How's it sounding? Let us know what the audio is like. Let me just double check, and I'll tell you right now why that is. That will be better now, JP.
Yes, that's yeah.
Thank you for the technical advice. I don't know if I was coming through some other mic in the studio, but I'm coming through this one now. So thank you for that. And apologies anybody out there who was perturbed by the poor sound quality. Loads to talk about. We're in fine fettle today, JP, because last couple of weeks there's been this cloud hanging over us. What if we don't get back to the games? That cloud has evaporated. We're back on Monday, but before we go back on Monday, you managed to fit a couple of games in. A cold Airdrie, Shrewsbury, Excelsior, Penny Cars, whatever it's called now, and you watched the B team.
I did, yeah.
Decent performance.
First foray into the B team experience, and it was good. It was it was just good to go to a game, full stop. Because you can say what you want. I don't know if I would have enjoyed watching that on the live stream in my flat on my Jack Jones. So went along, ended up bumping into a pal, Brian, who listens to the podcast. I sat next to him.
Brian.
I sat next to him on the bus going to Rennes. That's where we met on the. I forget the name of the bus, but it's the bus that runs from the Gallagate from Bar 67. You can imagine. You can imagine the scenes in that bus.
Oh, I can't imagine. Yes.
Brian and I were of the tame variety on that bus. We were about halfway down. Anything from about 4 or 5 rows to the back was just sheer chaos. But each to their own. So I met Brian a bit. Well, I watched the B team and I enjoyed it. The first half in particular I thought was good, and I was impressed with the boy Brooks and Wiley as well. The two of them, I kind of did my player cam and sort of honed in on them. Something that happened early on in the game made me think, right, I'm going to watch that guy. So I watched him and watched his movement, and had good number 8 he was, like, had really good game intelligence, good passing, and it all looked very urgent. It was quite weird watching sort of like a replica, obviously not as good quality replica of the first team, but you can see that they're all doing the same thing as the first team. The formation, unless I'm mistaken, was the same. So they look good. Joey Dawson up front looked like a completely different animal compared to the rest of them. Like, he doesn't look in the same age category. When you see them in real life on the pitch, like, he looks so big and ahead of them in physicality and everything else, and height. I don't know. Amy will be able to tell us better what the quality of Caledonian Braves are. I certainly don't rate their strip, as she said. But I don't know. I have no idea how good they are as a team. So whether that 2-0 victory was a good result for Celtic or not, I can't confess to be that knowledgeable about the current state of the league. But I just enjoyed it as what it was. I passed former Rangers defender Craig Moore on the way in as well. It was an interesting spot. I think is he an agent or something like that? I don't know, but I saw him anyway, and obviously there was no real atmosphere at the game. It would feel a bit weird if people were starting chants or songs at like a 500 strong crowd or 450 strong crowd in an Airdrie on a Sunday afternoon. I think it would have been a bit odd, but it was well attended, and it was good to see people out and just sort of braving the elements and supporting another arm of Celtic Football Club.
The big thing about that is there has been occasions, in actual fact, there's a few things you mentioned there about buses. I think back to my early days as a Celtic fan and some of the experience on supporters' buses. JP was nothing short of an education in life. And I always look back fondly on those days. And then when you're talking about this progression from B team to the first team, it's something that's been spoken about by McIntyre and Darren O'Day as well. So I think that when you're looking at the performance of that team, you're starting to see a style and the philosophy, and it's one of the ones where it's one in, one out. That's the idea in any case. And part of that is obviously a philosophy or an ethos. And a lot of people were concerned, a lot of Celtic fans were concerned that it's going to be difficult to create that from Ange Postecoglou when he is, in essence, the figurehead of his own philosophy, and he's not been able to bring his own staff, and it's been spoken about time and time again. But slowly but surely, he is building behind the scenes, not big name appointments in areas that will assist fitness, data analysis, etc. And of course, the under-18s now have a new coach who has great knowledge of Ange Postecoglou from his experience playing over in Australia as well. So we have appointed the likes of Stuart McLaren. We've got Ortega as well. You probably follow him on Twitter, ex-Benfica. Anton McElhone already in place. Slowly but surely is Ange filtering his philosophy throughout the club behind the scenes.
Well, it seems that way, but I just when you're saying about those names, I wonder, is he involved in the sort of interview process, the selection process? It's not something we're going to be privy to, is it? But I mean, is it him just saying, right, just go out and get somebody for that position, or is he having a say over it, like he's having a say over, well, certainly 3 of the 4 transfers that have come in so far? For a fact, it's been said now, we know that it was him that sanctioned these and scouted them as well, probably. So yeah, I wonder if those appointments that are being made, is that within the remit of the manager or the coach to do that, or is it from somewhere above? I don't know. That's my answer to that. I don't know, but I'd like to think it is. I'd like to think that he has some sort of say in it, rather than, because I've always said, other people have always said that the only thing we wanted to happen at Celtic was that people were hired for the position based on their skills or whatever. It was. We didn't want people doing the wrong role or being in the wrong position to do a job of someone else. You don't want the CEO getting involved in football affairs on the pitch. You wanted the manager to do that, and you just wanted everything, all the ducks in a row, so to speak. So hopefully that is the case with these appointments, and there's not any disharmony or this is the guy you're getting, like it or lump it. That can't surely be. I know that it happens in football clubs all over, but hopefully our club is thinking differently on that front now.
Yeah, moving away from that. I hear stories of back in the day when it was the old Celtic Park fascia at the front before we redeveloped it in 1987. And often people would go to pick up tickets, JP, and there was a wee hatch, and sometimes the hatch would open and it was Jock Stein that was sitting there. So talking about folk at the club doing other people's jobs, he'd be sitting in the office having a couple with, I think it was Jim Kennedy at the time, who was the ticket officer, and they'd be having, and he'd hand out the tickets. Can you imagine that, Jock Stein handing your tickets out to you? Going up to...
There's stories of Tommy Burns going down and hanging out in the ticket office, isn't there? Like, just having patter with people in the queue and things like that, which I mean, to have that sort of memory of Tommy Burns, if that was the only time you ever met Tommy Burns and it was because he came down to the ticket office to get something or give something to them, and then I can't remember where it was I heard it, but he went round everybody in the queue and had a conversation with everybody that was standing in the ticket office at the time, and
I love it. I love Tommy Burns stories. JP, I mean, we had the great privilege of having his two daughters in here in the studio, and they were talking about how people used to go on about Tommy always being late for things. He said, but that's because he would never pass you. If a Celtic fan spoke to him, he would stand and spend time with him. Therefore, wherever he was going, he'd be late for it. And he was notoriously late for most things. And I know that obviously you've got fond memories as well. But there is a feeling at the moment. There's a sense that you're talking about getting your ducks in a line. At the same time, you look at the headline, how important are the returns of Jullien and Forrest to the title push? It does appear as though things are starting to fall into place just at the right time. As we enter the second half of the season, the fans are coming back to the stadium. JP, after one game, thankfully, where we weren't able to go against St Johnstone, and players' long-term injuries to the likes of Jullien and Forrest, these guys are coming back. They played a behind closed doors game up at Lennoxtown, and a few people must have been in the know because they've been able to get some kind of information from the game and put it out on Twitter. So we play St Mirren, we win 1-0. Young Owen Muffet scores a goal. Jullien gets 45 minutes. Forrest is back. Our three Japanese boys all play. And I think that when you're looking at that particular, I mean, I'm not expecting Jullien and Forrest to be playing on Monday against Hibs, incidentally. But how pivotal is the return of these two guys to Celtic's title push this season?
Well, on Jullien, I guess the time will tell as to how he is. I mean, it's been such a long time that he's been out, and you think of the way that the landscape of the whole club has changed. He now has to adapt to a new manager's way of thinking, new, I would imagine, not rules as such, but there'll be new sort of guidelines, shall we say, for how players are expected to train and play and everything else. Obviously there's a new system, so I don't know how Jullien is going to be. It's a weird one because it seems like a million miles away, a million years ago that he cracked his knee off the post in that game, a silent Celtic Park, in a game that was really, although we won, that was us kind of clinging on to title aspirations. Really, at that point, we won that game, and you're thinking, right, we go to Ibrox, what can we do at Ibrox? But then we lose him, and we have to play a makeshift defence, and it just didn't work. And everything else was going so wrong at that time. We would have needed to go to Ibrox with a full strength squad, or full strength first 11 anyway, to have a real chance of it. So him in his absence, there's been so many people have said, people that you would acting like they're in the know or whatever. This in the know thing seems to be getting flung about, and maybe some people are in the know. I'm not. Don't think you are. You've not told me anything differently about Jullien or anything like that. But Jullien has been touted as being someone that's not going to play for Celtic again. I've seen people with quite an authoritative kind of thinking that he was never going to play for Celtic again. Like, oh, he's away. He's done. His contract will run out and he'll be away. But here he is. He played yesterday in a bounce game. He's on the verge of coming back into the squad. I just hope that he comes back as. I mean, remember you've said that people were saying we needed another centre half because Jullien was not that great, and he wasn't that great, but our defence as a whole wasn't that great, and he needed somebody else alongside him. So he's coming into a defence that has been criticised, but factually is the best defence, has the best defensive record in the league. So you can't run away from that. So he's certainly not going to waltz back into the team, but it's good to have someone of his standing to come back in and be there to call upon should we suffer an injury. Because we've definitely been light on that front, and we don't want to get to the point where we're having to play near beat on at centre half, because he's been playing well at defensive midfield, you know, or just midfield in general. He's been playing well, which is his position. So, yeah, I think Jullien, question mark next to him. Forrest, also question mark next to him as well, because he's not really had a good run at it. We know what James Forrest can provide. I've always been a fan of James Forrest. As I've said before on here, the guys round about me at Celtic Park have given him a torrid time and gave him a torrid time. And even through gritted teeth, would have to sort of give him applause at times when he did something well or score a winning goal against, you know, Rangers or in a European tie or whatever. So I hope Forrest can shake off whatever it is that has been bothering him and come back and make an impact, because, again, you know, we might have signed these players, but we're not, you know, it's not an embarrassment of riches just because Forrest is coming back. You know, Abada has been good, but Forrest can give you something that is, you know, potentially, you know, match winning. And I know Abada scored goals as well that have contributed to 3 points or progressing to another round of a tournament. But Forrest has been there, done that, serial winner, so many trophies under his name, and we don't have many of them in the squad. You know, that a lot of those guys all left. So
yeah,
Forrest is one of the sort of last men standing from the most successful period that I probably will ever experience in my Celtic supporting life.
And I think it's important to have certain figures from the successful period retained. Yeah. And I'm not just doing it through romanticism. Here's a player, JP, who is in his 13th season as a first-team player at Celtic. 13th season. He's played over 400 games for the club. He's contributed to 200 goals virtually as either a goal scorer or providing an assist. So he is a game changer, like you were saying there. And I just think we've not had the luxury of having a full complement of staff. And people might say, well, you shouldn't expect that. I think that's fair play to say that. However, you wouldn't expect the amount of injuries that Celtic have had in the first half of the season. I'm kind of pinning my hopes on the fact that there's been an upsurge of injuries due to the change in style, tempo at the training. And people have cited the Jurgen Klopp impact when he went to Liverpool as an example of it maybe taking 6 or 7 months until the players' bodies adapt to the intensity of the training. And then what you'll see in the second half is less injuries. And I hope that is the case, because we have been absolutely hammered by injuries. But just because of that, I wouldn't expect to say, well, we're going to be hammered in the second half as well. However, it is always a concern with these two guys. I look back on Jullien and I think about the important goals he scored, you know, in the League Cup final against Lazio. And then last season, it's interesting that you brought this up, because him and Ayer were getting dogs abuse. They were getting real criticism around the Kilmarnock draw at Rugby Park. Around about that time, we need a new centre half in. We went out and got Shane Duffy. We thought that was the answer at the time. It didn't work out for him, and then the injury to Jullien. So he's had high and low points in his Celtic career already. And I just think if he comes in and he retains his match level in terms of the fitness, then we've got a real candidate for a first pick in the centre of defence. Interestingly about Beaton, it's not so much now you don't want Beaton to play at centre half because you don't rate him as a centre half. It's because of his performances in midfield, and that's a big turnaround in itself as well, JP. So I think that's an interesting point. Patrick Murphy comes in on the YouTube channel to make a point as well. It's only important if these two players can maintain their fitness. We've been hit badly by injuries, like I was saying, Patrick, during the first half of the season. If we're to push for the title, we need to ensure players aren't overworked. And I think that, I hope, and as I say, going back to the Klopp example, JP, the worst of the injuries are behind us. Do you subscribe to that?
Well, I mean, we can't predict how things are going to go with injuries because they're a bit random. But, you know, I mean, somebody counted them up. It was 18 at one point. 18 players were missing from those the last two fixtures before the split. I mean, that's not many. I mean, as much as somebody was saying, my pal Chris was saying to me yesterday about the St Mirren game and going, I really hope we don't look back at that St Mirren 0-0 game at the end of the season and go, that's where we could have and should have. That's that point, or those 2 points that we dropped there will make a difference. But I still think it's kind of a bit of a miracle that we got through that period without dropping more points because of the lack of cohesion. I know we're last minute winner at Ross County, obviously, but I mean the lack of cohesion and available players to play was quite something. And you wonder. Well, there's absolutely no way in the world that the team at the other side of the city could have coped with that level. I know that they're supposed to have a stronger squad and all the rest of it, but I'm not buying that for a second that they could have coped in the same way that we did with that level of players missing.
No.
I'll put it out there. If one of them wants to jump on here and get all snide and start flying, comments about going, "Oh, check this maniac saying that," if you really believe that, then fine. But there's no way in the world they could have coped with that level of injury or players missing in that period. So to drop only those 2 points at St Mirren, which was horrible, obviously, but I think that was still a pretty great achievement considering where we'd come from. And there was a guy on Super Scoreboard the other night. He got absolutely destroyed. I listen to it now and then, just out of interest to see what's going on, but. There's a guy, a Rangers fan, came on and said, why are Celtic flying this season? They've got the same points as they were on this time last season. So what's the difference? How come they're flying this season? And then it was like a disaster last season. And Gordon Duncan came back and just completely destroyed the guy. And so did all the 2 panelists. And the guy was left with very little to say at the end of it because it was like, well, you've taken something that, yes, factually might be correct in terms of the points total, but the narrative of what happened, what Postecoglou had to take over, the majority of our points were dropped in the first month, right? Like the Livingston game, Hearts, Rangers. You would expect in a turnaround and the amount of players that were turned over and we lost and brought in, that there's going to be points dropped and people adapting and everything else. We are in a completely different situation to the one we were in last season at this stage. We've not got Dubai as a thing that's absolutely decimated the squad going into the first games of the post-split scenario. We've not got the players that want away that were said to be wanting away by the manager. So we don't have that doubt about people's character and hunger in the squad. And we also didn't get spanked 4-1 home and away against a meagre side like Sparta Prague, no disrespect, but we held our own against Bayer Leverkusen in Germany. We held our own against Real Betis in Spain. We beat Betis at home. Yes, the outlier is Leverkusen at home where we got royally gubbed 4-0, but everybody that was at that game will know that wasn't really a 4-0 game. And didn't come out of that, head in hands going, "Oh, we're in a mess," and blah, blah, blah. So, plus we were playing a very good side. So that whole narrative of last season at this stage versus this season at this stage is completely and utterly different. And the mood around, and we've seen the players that have come in and the way that they're buying into the club, and they're pushing towards something. Last season, it just felt like whatever we were going towards was getting further and further away from us, regardless of what we did. At least we feel like we can actually do something here,
It's completely, you're right, it's completely different circumstances. Last season it was unravelling. This season there's a galvanisation, without a shadow of a doubt. The signings as well, there's another thing. The signings we brought in weren't working last season. What we've seen this time round, the signings that were brought in and making a positive impact as well, JP. So I think in a lot of these cases, although the person might have been feeling foolish for coming on all guns blazing, is empty vessels make the most noise. And we both know that, JP, and that's what happens now. We're talking about going through that period of time. If you were to have dropped 2 points, would have taken it before that run of games. I just think it was unexpected that those 2 points would be dropped against that opposition. And that was the frustration there. But you're right in what you say. We're going in against St Mirren with Mikey Johnson left-hand side, Owen Moffat right-hand side. We're going in against St Johnson with Kyogo pulling up with an injury and us having to bring on Joey Dawson to make his debut 15 minutes into the game. So you're absolutely right. the squad of any other team, I would say, in Scottish football would not have been able to get through as unscathed as Celtic did. And I knew there was a few points dropped here and there. But in terms of the points dropped and Ange's philosophy and galvanising the side, we were thankfully invited along to the press conference for the 3 new arrivals, and we got a chance to ask them questions as well. And there's been a few interesting points from each of the players. First up, Maeda was asked about a potential partnership, JP, with Kyogo. And I remember earlier on in the season talking about Jota down the left, Abada down the right, Kyogo through the middle, the exciting prospect of that trio going through the centre at Celtic's attack. But Maeda, from what I've seen and heard, and Kyogo is as exciting, a spearhead as anything I can imagine at the moment. Now, I know he's not kicked a ball for us competitively yet, but by all accounts, Maeda, there was a surprise in Japan and through the press in Japan that he wasn't the first signing from the J-League by Ange Postecoglou. We have got him in the door now. Are we about to see a slight change in approach in terms of the shape to get the two of them playing through the middle?
I think I very much doubt he's going to completely change the formation, because it seems to be pretty well drilled into the psyche of the players that are there already, and it would seem that Maeda can fit the system, and will obviously know how the boss, as he calls him, plays his football, and we'll want to adapt. You mean like playing 2 up top rather than 3?
And but not because it's the age-old thing of why don't we play 2 up top at Celtic Park? I've heard it a million times, JP. I've uttered those words myself. And I know that the modernisation of shape and the way that the game is approached means that very few teams play 4-4-2, and I totally appreciate all that. But I am looking at a tantalising prospect of Maeda and Kyogo playing together. And I don't want Kyogo to end up playing more kind of left, because I don't think he's effective in that position.
No, it definitely isn't. But I don't know. It would be interesting. I mean, we'll see what happens on Monday. But am I right in thinking that Kyogo and, well, I don't know, I think Jota's only just come back into the country, or from what I'm led to believe by somebody that told me yesterday, a friend, that he's just come back from Portugal. Is that right? Did you hear anything about that?
Yeah, and I mean, I've also read that Kyogo's definitely out as well, which is to be expected. Although we have gone into games, the one against Leverkusen, for example, we go into that and you see the lineup before the game, McGregor and Kyogo both play, which was a big shock to everybody in the stadium, I think. But yeah, I wouldn't expect any of the two to be playing on Monday night. So Maeda will probably lead the line on Monday. Yeah,
with a winger either side of him, probably. And he takes Kyogo's place. So I guess we'll start on that front, and on that note, just cannot wait to get back on Monday. I mean, I know it's not been that long. Well, it has kind of been that long since we've been at Celtic Park, because I guess the last time was start of December or something like that. I remember leaving Celtic Park at some point, the last game, and somebody said, "Oh, we're not back in here till the 29th against Hibs." And that felt a long time at that point. So now it's gone right through till now. And obviously, and in actual fact, I wouldn't have been able, had the game been on the 29th, I would have missed it, because I was DJing a wedding that night. So thank you, Celtic, and the other 9 clubs, for thinking of me when you were at the negotiating table, to bring forward the winter break. That's much appreciated. I know that it was all about agendas and everything else, isn't it? So I'm glad that you got my email.
The memo, absolutely. The only other thing I would say prior to talking about getting back into the stadium is, I think we're all of the opinion that there are certain players whose time at the club is up. They will be moved on either permanently or a loan to buy during, hopefully, this January transfer. But there is a player where, he's kind of gone under the radar in that he's been out the picture due to injury. He's back training. He's been overshadowed by the arrival of Maeda, for example, and it's Giakoumakis. So he's obviously come in after the best season of his career in a quality division, but not with a quality team. He's come into Celtic, stop-start, But I don't think he's a player that we can write off. So I understand why all the focus is going to be on the new signing and obviously on Kyogo. But Giakoumakis may well have a part to play between now and the end of the season as well, JP.
I mean, without a doubt. I mean, I saw a clip of Ange Postecoglou talking about the two Greek players with I think it was a Greek TV station or something. I'm not entirely sure what it was, but he was talking about Giakoumakis and sort of, vouching for him, believing in him. So it makes you think that he had a hand in that transfer, and it wasn't one of these ones that's just been handed to him. I don't really get the impression that Ange Postecoglou is the type of guy that would take players just being handed to him. And maybe that's naive on my part. And I certainly know one person listening and watching this that'll be laughing right now and going, "Oh, you're so naive. That of course that's what happens. That's just football." But maybe I'm just a fantasist on that level to think that this is suddenly all changed and the manager is responsible for the signings and that's it, full stop, like we've always wanted. Because he lives or dies in this game, in this role, in this job for the people that he signs and lets go. And there was all the talk last week about Jullien Henderson going. I thought about that after the bulletin, just thinking there's not that many players that have left Celtic like Jullien Henderson that have gone on to turn around and sort of say, well, you let us go. Look at me now. I'm playing for X team or Y team. There's not that many that I can remember in my lifetime anyway. Just that it's never, the grass is never always green. I think Henderson will probably go on to have a good career, but is he going to become a £20 million player who Celtic will rue the day that they let go to Hibs for a nominal fee? I don't think so. And that's no disrespect to him, but I just don't think that's going to be the case. So with Giakoumakis, we've only seen glimpses of him. There's points that he's looked good. Ferencvaros, when he came on, looked like the option that we needed, as somebody to be strong and hold up the ball. And then obviously you miss a penalty in the last minute in a crucial league game at home. That's going to turn a lot of people's opinion against you. And it's now, for him, it's now about trying to win those doubters back. I certainly wouldn't go, oh, well, he's no use because he missed a penalty. Do you know what I mean? I mean, Henrik Larsson missed penalties, if I remember rightly. So, he's only human. If he comes back and starts contributing, whether that's scoring goals, assisting, in any way, if people see that he's, wanting to knuckle down and fight for the cause, then I'm sure that penalty miss will be forgotten. I just hope he can get to a level of fitness that he's able to do that, because there's not going to be anything more frustrating than sitting there wanting to contribute, but you can't because you've got a knock or you're carrying this a long-term injury or whatever. So we'll see how it plays out.
Fresh start, JP. Fresh start for the two guys on the headlines, Jullien and Forrest this season, and hopefully another fresh start for Giakoumakis. Just want to give everybody a shout out who's joined us on all the various platforms that we're going out on. Alan Robertson, good afternoon. And to yourself as well, Lanky67, and to Paddy and everybody else who's getting involved. Jungle Lion, maybe Jota hasn't signed because he doesn't want to. I think the longer that goes on, the more worried we get, because we have got this affinity already with Alexis Jota and Cameron Carter-Vickers as well. Sean, I remember Colin Watt mentioned that we should bring 6 players in January, and although nobody scoffed at him, we thought that's a bit ambitious. Sean F reckons that we still need another attacking midfielder, possibly 2 with Turnbull's injury, a centre-half and another wide player. Now, we've brought in 4. One I expect to be a Celtic B player coming over from Ireland, Sligo Rovers, and I think he's been brought in the same kind of vein as Joey Dawson, for example. But we've brought in 3 Japanese players. The one player that got away, it would appear, is somebody who we have been speaking about, in Riley McGree. And he's one of the guys that, the name is mentioned, JP, and like everybody else, you go and do as much research as you possibly can so that you can discuss it on the bulletin. And it did look as though we were at an advanced stage, but we're being gazumped, if that's the right word, by Middlesbrough. And that then is met with the usual and the expected kind of. I didn't see any outrage from Celtic fans, but what you get is you get a lot of people within the media saying that's because the Championship's a better level than the Scottish Premiership, and that whole argument rages on. This is down to money, isn't it? Riley McGree has gone to Middlesbrough because he's been offered more money. It's as simple as that.
It would appear so. Yeah, I mean, I know that he's obviously played in that league with Birmingham City, so he knows the environment and probably knows that it's maybe his level to sort of push on. I mean, what age is he? 23. I'd never heard of the guy before last week, so I'm not crying into my cornflakes about it. It's one of those that's sounded good for a brief moment, and you started thinking, okay, he's worked with Ange Postecoglou. He's clearly a sort of hot property. I saw somebody, sorry to bring up them again, but I saw somebody slagging off the fact that we were signing somebody for Birmingham City. I think Joe Aribo came from Charlton, so to be putting any digs in at Celtic for trying to sign players from the Championship or whatever is just absolute nonsense. And I know that was just one voice, it wasn't thousands of people. But yeah, anyway, I've got no problem with where Celtic shop to buy players, especially when it's Ange Postecoglou that's signing the checks, because I didn't have a problem with him going to Japan and getting Kyogo Furuhashi. Kyogo Furuhashi gave me one of the best days of my life as a Celtic supporter at Hampden Park last month. So I don't care where players come from. It's not about the league that they're coming from. It's about what the manager thinks he can do with those players. And Riley McGree may or may not have been a good player for Celtic, but you think back to, I don't know if you've ever heard Chris Sutton talking about his options when he was coming to Celtic.
Yeah.
Middlesbrough was one of them. And he went, do I want to go to Middlesbrough and play up front with Hamilton Ricard, or do I want to go to Celtic and play with Henrik Larsson? Let me think about that. But the thing is, maybe at that point we matched Middlesbrough for the monetary thing. But I think Chris Sutton was well off enough at that point to be able to make a decision based on football rather than money. Riley McGree's only 23. He's obviously at that weird age where it's like, right, I need to do something now and make a name for myself now. Am I going to do it quicker in England? Maybe. So I don't hold any grudges against the guy for choosing. I wouldn't start slagging him for going to Middlesbrough over Celtic. I know a lot of people have said, oh, well, if you're going to choose Middlesbrough over Celtic, then that says a lot about you as a person, because 60,000 at Celtic Park. But I think that's just the sort of fan in you saying that, if you actually take the Celtic specs off and go, wait a minute, this guy's got a decision to make about his life and his career. And unfortunately, we don't even know how far down the line we were with him as a player, as a signing. We don't know if it was the case if he was almost on a flight to Glasgow and then, got a flight to Newcastle instead, or you've no idea. So we might have pulled the plug a lot earlier. It's all paper talk, not in the know. So.
You say that. But I mean, it's happened in the past, JP, and get the Ginola klaxon out, because it happened with David Ginola, and I'm thinking, I can't just use that as an example. So can you remember the other example with Mark de Gries? Remember Mark de Gries? So he was the Belgian internationalist. He was a goal scorer. He played for Anderlecht, and in 1995, Celtic looked to be on the verge of signing him, and he went to Sheffield Wednesday. Can you remember de Vries?
I'm trying to remember that, because as soon as you said that, I was like, do you mean Mark de Vries, as in the Hearts player? And then I'm trying to remember the spelling of de Vries. How did you spell de Vries?
It was Degrys, Mark, as in Mark Bolan, with a C.
Yeah, I remember it now. Because it was at that point where if we got linked with any, player from outside of Scotland, your ears immediately picked up, and you're thinking, "Wow, this guy could be good." Because that was post Pierre, wasn't it?
It was, and at that time, Tommy Burns had opened up the markets. You're talking about the markets that Ange is shopping in. Tommy Burns opened up the markets at Celtic. When he took over, and you're looking at the makeup of that squad, there were very few non-UK players in terms of their birth. So you had Rudy Vata, he was part of the squad. He came in under Liam Brady, but very few. And then he brings in Pierre, and then he starts to bring in Morten Vikhorst came in. Obviously been playing in Scottish football, but he comes in, and then the three amigos plus Tom. But we were looking in different markets, and Mark de Vries was one of the players that the paper talk was that he was on the verge of signing. But it's happened so many times. I'm not getting too excited about it, but I do wonder, when I seen his name, it came out of nowhere. I guess, will Ange Postecoglou still be looking for a similar type player because he's lost out on this one? Is he still going to be looking for that attacking midfielder?
Yeah, well, that's something that I was quite interested in, because last week, at some point, or one of the days last week, it seemed like we were being linked with a ridiculous amount of players, more than I can remember being of a normal sort of transfer window. It was. I know everyone always says it's like silly season, but I mean, we were, pretty much putting markers down in so many different countries. Iran, America. There was others as well. It was not Algeria, an Algerian guy, a French guy as well. I mean, there was a good 4 or 5. So how those links have all transpired, whether it's agents leaking it to the papers, or whether it's clubs leaking it to try and build up interest in their players, I don't know. But there's no smoke without fire. Surely those aren't just random links. So maybe all those links are his sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we don't know what number Riley McGree was in that list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I don't think, again, maybe I'm giving too much credit to Ange Postecoglou. He doesn't seem like the type of guy that would just throw all his eggs in one basket and then be left red-faced when someone decides to go to a different club. I think he's probably far too experienced and long in the tooth to just be like, oh well, we're getting him. Looks like that's going to be fine, and then have a shirt number for him before he's even in the door. I think there'll be other options, and I'm kind of excited to see who else he brings in.
No, I'm excited as well. I mean, the whole process, a big part of it now, JP, is there's a whole game where the market is being, it's being dealt with by agents. So the agents are leaking information here or there to try and orchestrate moves. So a lot of the time, the information is leaked to trusted reporters, and you've got Fabrizio Romano coming out, here we go, and he's one of the first to know. And if he tweets out, you're thinking it's happening, kind of thing. So a lot of that is agent. There's a big game with the agents, and sometimes, I guess, and I'm not saying this happened with Riley McGree, but sometimes Celtic will be getting used as a pawn in the bigger game to get a move elsewhere, and that will be happening as well. One of the big stories on the way out last week was that we had interest for Stephen Welsh from Udinese. We had an interesting conversation last week about the success of some of the Scottish youngsters who have gone out to Italy, and Henderson and Hickey being two of them. Both had been in at Celtic. Hickey, of course, never played for the first team. But there seems to be this newfound kind of respect for Scottish stock coming through. They would, go for a player like Stephen Welsh. It looks as though our old pal Brennan Rodgers has kind of moved a few pawns himself, because Benkovic is undergoing a medical at Udinese. He was freed by Leicester just yesterday, I think it was. And what do you make of the Welsh interest? And again, it's not one of the moments where it's like, I've always said he's a great player. I've always championed Welsh. I think he's still developing. He's far from being a finished article. But it is interesting when a club in Serie A are coming and making an offer, be that a loan deal or permanent for Welsh.
Well, I mean, it seemed to be getting kind of derided and ridiculed online from what I saw, saying that's a nonsense. Like, why would Udinese be going for Stephen Welsh? But I mean, why wouldn't they? I mean, why did Liam Morrison go to Bayern Munich? Why is Nathan Patterson gone to Everton? There's a whole load of questions you can fling up there, and I'm putting Patterson in deliberately because he's hardly played any games for for Rangers, and suddenly he's going for 10 million quid to Everton. Like I don't think you can. It's about what a club sees in a player and what they think they can do with that player. They're not signing. Everton aren't signing a finished article in Nathan Patterson. Udinese wouldn't be signing a finished article in Stephen Welsh. It's about what they think they can do with that player and what they see in that player at this stage in their career that they think they can better and mould. And it wouldn't have been a terrible move for him, but I'm glad that this would not be the window where we want to lose any players that have been contributing to the first team, and he is definitely a player that's been contributing to the first team. So I certainly wouldn't begrudge him the move if they came back in the summer and there was a deal to be had. I would be disappointed because it's a Scottish player and you don't want to see your Scottish homegrown players leave. But it all depends on how Celtic see him developing in the future as a Celtic player. Because if it's laid out to him that he's not in their plans, like Jullien Henderson, then obviously there's a discussion to be had at that point, I would say. But I mean, I was saying it last week. It's amazing for a Scottish player. It would be amazing for a Scottish player. Welsh won't remember. Tragically won't remember the 90s and Gazzetta Football Italia and that hype about Italian football. That'll be lost on him. That'll be like retro nostalgia that he might see on YouTube or something like that. Whereas, unfortunately, you and I remember Sunday afternoons, after Little House on the Prairie or the Waltons or Land of the Giants, Italian football came on and that was your afternoon, watching George Weah and, Lentini and everybody, all of those guys were phenomenal. There was never a bad game really in that period. It didn't look like there was a bad game last night between Inter and Juve as well. I wish I'd watched that, but I know just to get the experience and going over and playing in Italy and the lifestyle, and I'm sure Liam Henderson is a good person to phone to ask about it. I'm pretty sure he's not having a bad time over there.
No, definitely not.
Personal life or on the pitch.
See, the big thing there, though, JP, I don't know why there was a surprise, because some of the examples you've mentioned where young Scottish talent has gone on to become a success, either down south or in Italy, for example. I mean, the success of Hickey and Henderson, there's teams said to have been interested in Hickey in the English Premiership during this transfer window to bring him over from Italy. Then you look at I'm not even going to say half a dozen, because there's more that have left the kind of Celtic academy and gone elsewhere. They've gone to Watford, they've gone to Blackburn and Liverpool and Bayern Munich. A couple of them are going to Bayern Munich. So it's quite clear that there are Scottish academies that are producing talented players who can take that step up, albeit over a period of a few years of development. The Rangers' success story so far, I guess, would be Billy Gilmour, who's gone away down south, and we're talking Champions Leagues, we're talking playing at Wembley for Scotland against England, and then what does that do for the reputation of that kind of stable? Well, it means that you might pay £10 million for another guy coming through. And I think that Celtic are in a similar situation. So I wasn't that surprised. Looking at, interestingly, and I'm not going to say we should have gone for this guy, but looking at the guy who's gone the other way in place of Welsh, perhaps, in Benkovic, a player who Leicester spent 13 million quid on, right? He's played 40 games in 4 years, and that's not 40 starts. He's had 4 loan deals out. That's how we know about him. He came to Celtic for a spell. I liked him as a player, but far too injury prone by the looks of him. Yeah. And you look at him and you look at Simunovic, the two players at the back, at some point you looked at their ages, early 20s, you thought to yourself, both had changed hands. 13 million for Benkovic, 6.5, I think. Was the fee for Simunovic. How much did we pay for Simunovic? It was at 4.5, and then Torino wanted him for 6. These guys have, since that period of time 4 years ago, barely kicked a ball in senior football. So we wish him all the best. Hopefully that move works out for him as well.
Just shows you we are not like other clubs aren't immune to making bad moves and bad mistakes in the transfer market. Like that. You just cited 13 million for Benkovic, and he's barely contributed to Leicester.
2 games for Leicester he's played. 2 games.
It's the same for us. with like the likes of Ayeti and Barkas. Only we've got probably more out of them than obviously Leicester got out of Benkovic, because Benkovic spent time away on loan at Celtic, obviously, and did he not go somewhere else as well? Did he go to?
He did, because he went to Bristol City. And he also there was an interview last season when John Kennedy says that he was on Celtic's radar again, and I think he ended up in Belgium.
Yeah, on loan.
Yeah,
that's right. So I mean, it just shows you that you know, transfers are a strange world, you know, where, you know, not everything works out as you would expect. You know, I mean, when Benkovic went back to Leicester, I kind of fully expected, and when Brendan Rodgers came in, I fully expected, having worked with him already, fully expected him to sort of make his way into the team and start playing. But for whatever reason, I mean, I'll be interested to see how he develops at Udinese and see how he gets on there. Because it's a weird one. I don't even know what age Benkovic is. I couldn't tell you what age he is. I would guess sort of mid-20s.
Where is it? He's 24, but he'll be turning 25 in the summer.
Yeah. So. And with not a lot of games in the last couple of years, it's a strange one. But I was looking earlier on when we were talking about Jullien, because I wanted to find the team that night against Dundee United. So when he stopped that goal from going in, which did look like a certain goal, I think the score was 2-0. I think we were winning 2-0. And then we scored a third, if that's what I remember anyway. Obviously, wasn't at the game. I was sitting watching it and here in an empty stadium. But the team that night, I wanted to find it. The team that night, this is the world of Celtic that Jullien left in December 2020, and the world that he's coming back to. So the goalkeeper was Barkas. Right back was Frimpong. He was centre half with Christopher Ajer. Laxalt was at left back. The midfield was Soro, Christie, Turnbull, and McGregor, and up front was Griffiths and Edward. So, you know, that's like a completely different Celtic, really. I mean, I know you've got McGregor still there, and Turnbull. Currently, Turnbull's injured. Soro's nowhere to be seen. Barkas is halfway out the door. Laxalt's gone. Frimpong's gone. Ajer's gone. Christie's gone. Griffiths may as well be gone, and Edward's gone. So
incredible.
You know, it's weird to think that is what was then and what is now. You know,
it is in a relatively short space of time. Not to Jullien's career to have lost it over a year, but it leads us on to this question from Kevin Mack: where does Jullien fit this new system that he's coming into then? Because I always look back on Jullien, and I know that people go on about the times where apparently he was spooked by a big centre half and all this kind of stuff. I thought he was comfortable with the ball at his feet. I thought he had a range of passing. He was good long passing, short. He was good in the air. Where does he fit Ange's system? I don't think he's anywhere near being a similar player to Starfelt in terms of, you know, how's he going to work as a foil to Cameron Carter-Vickers, who is your first choice centre half every day of the week. I think he fits it pretty well because he does have that distribution, so he can play it out from the back. He can play it out to the inverted full-backs. And what he's going to offer, and we've spoken about this all season, if he gets back to his full fitness, and I really hope he does, is more of an aerial threat at set pieces offensively. Because, I mean, you know, people still say that we're not quite there defensively, but we've improved massively from last season, JP.
He scored at Rugby Park, I think. Remember, with a header just before, in that run of games at the start of 2020, before everything fell away because of COVID. And when we were on that run, playing really well, when he scored the header at Rugby Park, obviously scored in the Lazio game, and the cup final as well. So, you know, he has that in his locker to do some damage at the other end of the park, and it has been frustrating to not get goals from centre half, because at one point I'm sure he was on heading towards double figures for a season.
Yep.
I can't remember now, because it feels like about 3 or 4 years since I saw Jullien play for Celtic, just purely because of COVID. Like, everything seems to have been shifted a couple of years, because of that. So I can't remember. Normally my memory would be good for that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, he's definitely, I remember at one point thinking, wow, he's got more goals than most of our strikers, and strikers of other teams in the league as well, So you can't really put a price on that. To get a return from a centre half in terms of goals is massive, and it can dig you out of a hole. You get a corner kick at some point in a game, you're struggling at 0-0, looking for a goal. St Mirren away. I don't know how many corners we had in that game, but probably quite a few. And there you go. You've got a guy that of that height that can just pop up, and as long as he times his jump right, he's going to probably beat most people in the air in Scotland. And you've got a good chance of a goal. So, just on Monday as well, somebody said to me that they don't think it will be a full house because of the fact that there's so many Irish fans come over and it's a Monday night. So will those fans come over from Ireland on a Monday night? Will they be able to because of work and it's short notice? So I'm not suggesting they won't. I'm just saying I wonder how it will be on Monday, if it will be the full rocking stadium that we hope it will be, or what will happen in that front. You've also got the fact that people might still be wary. Again, it's unlikely, but people might still be wary about COVID and might not go to the game as a result. So, I'm not saying it's not going to be good. Of course it's going to be good, but I just wonder if it will be the full house that, it kind of should be.
Yeah, definitely. And again, the commitment to the travelling Irish fans to come to Celtic Park, and it's incredible every single time at home. It's unbelievable. But as you say, it's a big span on the works if it's a short notice and it's a Monday night, and
it is. I mean, I heard something about when the rumours started to happen about that it would be from the 17th. I heard that flights started to get booked up really quickly for the 2nd of February. With people just sort of gambling on the fact that they would be coming from Belfast or wherever and on that date. So I don't know if people did the same for the Hibs game, and whether buses have been booked, ferries have been booked, all of that kind of stuff. It's just it's weird that like something like this would just happen with like a week's notice or a week and a couple of days notice. It's a lot to ask people to shift their lives about for to get over. I mean, it's all right for me. It's just a longer road for me, but I'm thinking of people. It's not just Ireland. People travel from down south as well, and I'm sure further afield. So, but yeah, I'm just looking forward to being there.
Absolutely. I mean, you've obviously sparked a few memories from some of the people tuning in. JP, we're going to go for the full hour. We're not going to wrap up 5 minutes early, as some referees might want us to do, but we're not going to do that. Joe Porter, Roberto Baggio, absolutely, he was unbelievable. Then you've got, Baresi coming into the discussion here. You've got Edgar Davids with the goggles, Maldini, unbelievable. But there's a player, you mentioned Lentini, interesting because was he £16 million back then? Gianluigi Lentini, he signs for AC Milan, then he's in a car crash.
Yeah.
And he's on a life support machine and all that kind of stuff. He's out for ages. Giuseppe Signori, remember Signori for Lazio? Unfortunate that he played for them, but what a player he was, and he enjoyed a cigarette from time to time as well.
Vialli is smoking like a triple.
No, absolutely. Marco van Basten, dearie me, and no one.
Yes, absolutely
unbelievable. And I think he retired when he was 31, which is bizarre as well because of injury. Yeah. But he's talking about cigarettes and Marco van Basten, he was part of the Ajax squad that came over in the early 80s to play Celtic. And he was on that bus after the game at Celtic Park, where somebody around about Parkhead has nicked the hamper out the Ajax coach with all the kits in it. And the kit man's come onto the bus. This came from Jan Molby, this story. I never tire of telling this one. And if you've seen the footage, Ajax, I think, were wearing the blue strips against us that night. So the kit man comes onto the coach and says, in Dutch, I'm guessing, somebody's nicked the hampers, and he asked the players to go out and start chapping doors, right? Outside Celtic Park, seriously. So they're all going into these blocks of flats. They're chapping doors looking for the Ajax kits that they've just worn against Celtic. The only player that never left the bus was Cruyff, who was sitting at the back having a cigarette. So he just sat there whilst the likes of Rijgaard and Van Basten and Jesper Olsen and all these guys, Jan Moby, are knocking on doors looking for stolen Ajax kits. Where did they go? Leave a comment underneath the video if you know any more information about, because it was Lecoq Sportif Ajax jerseys.
I had a full silver Lecoq Sportif tracksuit when I was about 11 or 12. Thought it was the bee's knees. See, when you mentioned about a young Van Basten coming by Ajax, can you remember a young striker now of serious renown in the game who was with Ajax in 2001? 2001, Martin O'Neill's Celtic against Ajax. They had a young striker in their ranks.
Oh, Ibrahimovic.
Yes.
Yeah, because I had the programme for the away game and he was on the front of it.
Oh, was he? Oh, you got a programme? I was there, but I didn't get a programme. I've got my ticket, but I'm actually surprised I still have my ticket given the nick that I ended up in that night. But no, I think it was either the away leg or the home leg. He came on for the second half. I think it might have been the away leg actually that he got brought on, because obviously they were chasing the game because we were winning. And I think it was obviously that was his first big move, Zlatan at that point.
I'd still take him in the hoops.
If you haven't read Zlatan Ibrahimovic's book, I Am Zlatan, get it dealt with. It's absolutely brilliant. There's not many football players' books that I would read again. That's one, because his patter is absolutely unreal. Like the story about when Mino Raiola, he wanted to go to Barcelona. He was desperate to go to Barcelona, and he was just sitting there in his house one night, and Raiola had called his bluff and sort of said it's not going to happen. And then he phoned him and he went, "Got a plane ready for you to go to Barcelona." And he was like, "What?" And he just said, "Pack a bag." And then he last minute packed a bag. And he was in the middle of playing FIFA. And he just threw his controller down, got up, packed a bag, left, went away to Spain to sign for Barca. And then by the time he came back, obviously forgotten how things were when he left, he walked in the house and he just heard this like blaring like voice, like shouting. And he was like, "What the hell was that?" And he walked up the stairs. He'd left his PlayStation and telly on, and it was just like the commentary had just been like repeating and repeating. And he went, "Aye." So what a guy. I mean, that's just one story. There's hundreds of stories.
I need to read it. I've not read that. I do like an autobiography.
It's ridiculous. Like what he's achieved, the clubs he's played for. Absolutely, he's every right to be the arrogant B that he is.
And he plays on it as well. You know, he plays on it as well. You know what I mean, JP? Listen, we can't go off today without a big shout out to Ronnie Spector. Now, you've got a record there. Let's see this record. I said before we came on that this is my favourite song of all time. Be My Baby.
That's my dad's copy of Be My Baby by the Ronettes. My dad was a DJ in the Bradford and the surrounding areas in the 60s, and he would play the kind of more like dance and pop stuff, and then his mate that he DJ'd with played the heavier stuff. And I've inherited all my dad's 7-inch singles, and I knew I had this, and just seeing see the imprint. So it was printed on London Records, but if you see it says Phyllis,
right?
That was Phil Spector's label. So that was released on Phil Spector's label through an imprint, which was London Records. And August 1963 that came out, and I played it last night on my stereo. It sounded brilliant. You know, just hearing a 7-inch on decent speakers, it sounds amazing, and her voice sounds amazing. And yeah, just really, really sad. I don't know if you saw the performance that someone shared last night on YouTube, on Twitter of she did Be My Baby with Jules Holland. Probably not that long ago, like with a band, and Jules is on piano, and it's amazing. Like she's definitely in her like 60s or 70s at this point when she's doing the song, and her voice still sounds, incredible. And it's really sad when you lose somebody, like that. Especially somebody I think was still performing even recently. An absolute iconic voice and iconic song, like you said, "Be My Baby." You actually said controversially that it may be your favourite song of all time. That's a high accolade to give any song. So I mean, it's definitely one of mine. And when I've ever DJ'd and played it, when you hear those drums kick in, the crowd go mental for it, because it's obviously you've got the Dirty Dancing thing, which will be a big appeal, but then there's people amongst the crowd that just appreciate it for the amazing song that it is. And actually, first time I ever saw Las Vegas covered "Be My Baby" at Cabaret Voltaire, 2007 or 8, I think it was, maybe 2007. They were supporting a band, and I saw them play in front of about 20 people, and it was the original lineup of Las Vegas, and they covered "Be My Baby," and I was just like, what? Like, what a bold move to cover "Be My Baby." Like, that's not, you don't do that unless you're going to do it justice, and they did, to be fair. And like, obviously James, big massive Spectre fan, and fan of all the music of that time, so was going to obviously put his heart and soul into it, and they did. And I'm not sure if they ever recorded it or not, but yeah, there you go.
Magic. What I'm going to say is thanks to everybody who's listening. If you're watching on YouTube, we are currently 5 away from hitting 16. In fact, we're 1 away from hitting 16,500 subscribers on YouTube. What's the point in subscribing on YouTube? Well, you get content every single day. We're working on big content, big Celtic content, music as well. There is an unplugged session coming out on Saturday night with a certain Willie Doug. That's going to be coming to your ears on and your eyes on Saturday night. So that's one to look forward to as well, JP. So get subscribing on there and get us up to 16,500 as we continue to build the channel and create even more Acsom and music content. JP, it's always an absolute pleasure on a Thursday to speak to you for an hour about Celtic and a wee bit of music at the end. Enjoy Monday and have a great weekend.
Cheers, I look forward to it.